Do I have a healthy relationship with food? Do you eat when you're hungry and stop when you're satisfied? Eating to a point where you're gently satisfied rather than uncomfortably full sets the stage for developing the ability to actively listen to your body's cues and its needs. By choosing to stop eating when you're satisfied, you're recognizing and honoring your body's fullness cues. This is a really good example of food choices being based on internal cues, such as one's fullness level, rather than external factors. More on that later. Is what you eat influenced by external factors? We alluded to this point in a previous section. Eating because you're influenced by external factors can be problematic. What are some examples of external factors? When food choices are based on external factors, this can take on the form of dieting, food rules, guilt and shame, following a rigid meal plan, peer pressure, social events, and so on. The harm with following this type of approach is that it disconnects us from our body, in that our food choices are not based on what, how much, and when we're eating. Rather, the choices are determined by things outside of us. The external factors should not dictate the terms. Do you actually listen to your body and respect your body's natural cues? It's important to be tuned into our body's signals, and this includes hunger. By carefully gauging what the body needs, we can satisfy it accordingly. No more, no less. It's about being intuitive with food. And it's certainly true that these body signals can vary from meal to meal or day to day. Sometimes we may feel we require more food compared to other times. Again, these reasons are many and varied. The awareness of what the body needs creates a feeling of ease when it comes to food consumption. Feelings of stress, guilt, and remorse are removed. Instead, we feel relaxed and secure when we eat more during one meal and less at another because of understanding that our body's needs can change. Generally speaking, and perhaps with a few exceptions, there's no specific amount of food that you need to eat during each meal. Rather, the amount is determined by the body's natural cues. National Eating Disorders Association staff member and registered dietitian Sandra Kronberg called this relaxed eating, which is a perfect encapsulation. Do you feel anxiety, guilt, or shame associated with food? Anxiety, guilt, and shame are all negative emotions. These emotions and their connection to food consumption have been perpetrated and perpetuated by societal pressures and diet culture. They're a major contributing factor as to why so many people have an unhealthy relationship with food. The inability to relinquish these feelings frequently results in harm to your health and well-being. Let's take a look at a few examples. Example number 1. You feel anxious when you're going out to a restaurant, not knowing if you will find a keto-friendly food product or a dish that seems quote-unquote better to you. Example number 2. You experience guilt after not being able to resist the temptation of a sugary treat. Example number 3. You feel shame when you step on the scale and see a number higher than you had wanted. You then attribute this to the lack of self-control. Ideally, a healthy relationship with food is one that doesn't have such negative emotional responses to food. If you overeat, can you make peace with that decision and move forward? Or does it lead to a snowball effect? Overeating can happen for many reasons. It can occur because you waited too long before eating, skipped a meal, or attended a social gathering. Understanding the reason why overeating happened can help to reduce feelings of guilt. Overeating does not mean that you have failed, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have an unhealthy relationship with food. It simply means that you are human. In the grand scheme of things, the act of overeating is a great deal less harmful than the self-imposed guilt and shame. Do you focus on calories when making food choices? Calories alone do not provide the full picture when it comes to the nutritional profile of a food, as it doesn't give us any information about specific ingredients like sodium or sugar. Just because the nutrition facts label indicates that the given food product is low in calories, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's superior compared to a food product that's higher in calories. Clients often ask me if lower calorie foods are a better option, as there tends to be a negative association with higher calorie foods, for example, nuts and avocado. Just because a food is higher in calories, though, does not automatically mean that we should avoid it. The truth is, those foods can satisfy us way more, depending on what they are. Alternatively, when eating those lower calorie foods, it can actually lead to eating more due to feeling unsatisfied. Besides, even if you're a firm believer in the whole calories in, calories out principle, it's important to consider current research. According to Harvard Health, how your body burns calories depends on a number of factors, including the type of food you eat, your body's metabolism, and even the type of organisms living in your gut. Because of this multi-layered complexity, calories in and of themselves are not an accurate and effective tool for goals such as weight loss. Furthermore, focusing on calories can lead to compulsive behavior, general unease, anxiety, and guilt. When experienced for a prolonged period of time, these feelings can create a strain on your mental and physical health, further solidifying the unhealthy relationship with food. What's more, adhering to this principle can have the opposite effect than the one intended. The feelings of deprivation and accompanying negative emotions can result in binging behavior. So what should I do? It's important to take a more holistic approach to reading nutrition facts labels. If you're going to refer to them, consider sugar, sodium, fiber, vitamins and minerals, the list of ingredients, saturated and unsaturated fats, macronutrients, and so on. Do you feel the need to justify your food choices? Feeling the need to justify food choices can indicate some form of underlying guilt or feeling like you have to earn your food, and can contribute to the development of an unhealthy relationship with food. Examples of justifying food choices include, I deserve a treat because I went for a 45-minute run, or I don't normally eat this, but it's a special occasion, so I will. Being your own personal food police clearly points to a strong desire to have certain food, but only making room for it under special circumstances. In the first example I gave, it's a matter of permitting yourself to eat a treat only if you earned it through vigorous exercise. The second example is about self-restraint to a point of ongoing deprivation that you obviously want to relinquish, and you just look for a justifiable reason to do so. How do I overcome this mindset and develop a more healthy relationship with food? It takes practice to break the habit of thinking along these lines, and mindfulness. When you regularly provide your body with essential nutrients, fueling it when needed and replenishing when it feels depleted, your body will let you know. You will simply feel better. Conversely, when you provide your body with nutrient-devoid foods, it will let you know too. Sometimes it'll let you know sooner, sometimes later, but it will let you know regardless. And being aware of this and trusting your body accordingly, there should be no guilt when you have a treat, for example. As said before, the feelings of denial, guilt, and shame can be harmful to your relationship with food. Are you a mindful eater? What is mindful eating? According to Harvard Health, mindfulness means focusing on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and accepting your feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. It goes on to say that mindful eating means being fully attentive to your food as you buy, prepare, serve, and consume it. Of course, the fast pace of our lives makes mindful eating a challenge at times and near impossible at other times. But the more we try to incorporate its principles, the more likely they will become a habit. In addition, mindful eating includes a handful of key points and questions. Do you consider the health value of the food items you buy? Do you eat slowly enough to be able to pay attention to how you feel? Do you enjoy, savor, and appreciate the food you're eating? Do you use different senses when eating food? Are you eating as a response to an emotional want? For example, stress, boredom, frustration, or sadness, or due to actual hunger? Do you consider balance when purchasing foods? To develop a healthy relationship with food, it's important to achieve that balance. What does it mean to achieve balance when it comes to buying and eating food? Balance calls for the consideration of a few factors when selecting food. Factors such as price, accessibility, availability, convenience, taste, nutritional value, and so on. It's important not to completely discount one or two of these in favor of the others. For example, do not sacrifice everything in the taste department just because the food product is healthy. And at the same time, do not disregard the nutritional value of all the foods you buy in favor of flavor. In other words, try to keep things in balance. Do you make food choices based on the foods you enjoy eating? It's important to regularly eat foods that you enjoy eating, especially when trying to make changes to your eating habits. Eating should be a pleasant experience, not simply for energy. This forms an integral part of the previously discussed concept of mindful eating, and it also sets the stage for developing a healthy relationship with food. What if I only enjoy highly palatable, refined, processed foods? That may be so. However, with an open mind, some experimentation, and perhaps some nutrition education, it is certainly possible to enjoy foods that are nutritious. We have developed our palates and eating habits as children after regular and sustained exposure to certain foods. Just as your palate adapted to and developed as a result of those experiences, it can also accept and adapt to others. This may not be an immediate occurrence by any means, but it can happen over time. Nutritious food can be enjoyed just as much as any other food. This is particularly true in today's world where many of us have access to a wide array of foods. Modifications to meals are generally commonplace, and nutritious food product substitutions make the process of trying new food much more simple. Are you a flexible eater? Flexible eating implies, flexibility. In other words, you're more likely to be a flexible eater if you avoid the all or nothing approach. Things are not so black and white to you. Certain foods are not all bad, whereas others are not all good. It's this ability to recognize gradations that makes you a flexible eater, preventing you from leading yourself down a path to developing an unhealthy relationship with food. Inflexible eaters, on the other hand, self-impose rigid rules upon themselves, believing that adherence to these rules is superior and the only path to achieving the desired goal. So what's wrong with black and white thinking? Thinking in this way can dichotomize things in life. It creates an us versus them mentality. Life is much more complex than that, and this includes eating and our relationship with food. In addition, thinking along these lines can lead to compulsive and obsessive behavior, creating a very unhealthy relationship with food and eating in general. It can also erode objectivity and open-mindedness, keeping you from learning about new foods or accepting the latest nutritional findings. Having a positive, healthy relationship with food means being flexible in the sense that we cannot control all food environments, as doing so can lead to a very rigid way of eating. This rigidity can potentially lead to missing out on social events in an attempt to control one's intake. Being flexible, on the other hand, helps to keep things in perspective, allowing you to consider and perhaps enjoy both sides. Are you an on and off dieter? On and off dieting, colloquially known as yo-yo dieting, is the black and white approach put into practice. Going all in, making sudden, drastic changes, and depriving yourself of any and every food that is enjoyable is a recipe for abandonment. This approach no doubt flies in the face of mindful eating. It is also detrimental to the concept of building a healthy relationship with food. That being said, however, it's not to say that you shouldn't make a conscious effort to eat more nutritious foods while reducing or maybe eliminating some foods altogether. Not at all, but this process has to be a flexible, gradual, and sustainable one that doesn't have you feeling deprived. Do you watch what other people eat in order to gauge how much you should eat? Eating the same amount of food that others eat is impersonalization personified, if you excuse the unique way of phrasing. Because we are all different with varying dispositions, tendencies, and proclivities, we should never apply such a one-size-fits-all mindset. To be a mindful eater who has a stable and healthy relationship with food, you should only listen to your body when it comes to food consumption. Learn to trust your body, resist peer pressure, if any, and eat according to how you feel. I always tell clients, eyes on your own plate, meaning that no matter how other people around you may approach food, we don't want to let that change how we approach food for ourselves. Do you obsess over the number on the scale? Those of you who are numbers focused or goal oriented will probably scoff at our remarks here, but nevertheless we feel it's important to comment on this point. While there's nothing wrong with jumping on a scale to give you a general idea of where your weight is at any given moment, doing so cannot be the most important or the only indicator of progress or lack thereof. There are so many reasons for that we would need to devote an entire blog post on its own to do it justice. That being said, however, here is a glimpse into why you shouldn't obsess over the number on the scale. Number one, constantly jumping on the scale can become a bad habit, a compulsion, leading to negative emotions. Sometimes this may then take on the form of severe restriction in an attempt to lose weight. Other times it could lead to binging due to self-sabotage. Number 2, there are so many reasons why weight fluctuates. Sodium and carbs may cause water retention, which can cause a spike in your weight. Varying hydration levels, expelled waste or lack thereof, increased muscle mass, changes in metabolism, medications, menstrual cycle, alcohol intake, illness, and more. So unless you're aware of and paying attention to all of the many factors that can contribute to weight gain with the same diligence as you dedicate to weighing yourself, then perhaps it's wise to refrain from passing judgment on what you see when you jump on the scale. Do you restrict food intake out of fear of gaining weight? The anxiety associated with the fear of gaining weight is a negative emotion that should not be inherent when you possess a healthy relationship with food. In addition, the subsequent restrictive behavior can lead to undereating, malnourishment, and disordered eating patterns. Restriction of food is much more than a simple reduction in calories or an overall insufficient calorie count. Excessive and/or prolonged food restriction can cause nutrient deficiencies in the body, be detrimental to brain function, negatively affect metabolism, cause digestive distress, affect energy levels, negatively impact mood, and in severe cases lead to amenorrhea. Do you rely on food to cope with emotions or to manage stress? One of the more prominent signs that may indicate an unhealthy relationship with food is if you repeatedly use it to cope with a range of emotions, often unpleasant ones. Rather than listening to your body and eating to satisfy hunger, you eat to avoid dealing with the root cause of a negative emotion. Instead, you seek a quick fix that acts as a temporary escape from the unpleasant emotions you are feeling. Now, emotional eating is a very common part of the human experience. However, if food is the only coping mechanism for those uncomfortable emotions, it can contribute to the development of an unhealthy relationship with food. Examples of healthy and unhealthy responses. 1. A healthy way of dealing with negative emotions. When stressed from the demands of your job, you ask yourself what it is that you need in that moment, whether it be exercise, listening to music, taking the dog for a walk, in order to release stress and tension. Number 2, unhealthy way of dealing with negative emotions. When you're stressed about your relationship troubles, you mindlessly overindulge in highly palatable foods containing sugar, salt, and/or fat in order to receive a temporary but short-lived rush of endorphins. Do you engage in regular overeating or binge eating behavior? This question is aimed at helping you determine if you have a healthy relationship with food and is closely related to the previous point. This type of behavior can result from the feeling of powerlessness to be able to moderate and/or stop eating excessive amounts of food. It can also be triggered by restriction, whether it be due to not eating enough throughout the day or following self-imposed food rules. Are you over-exercising? There is a fine line between the desire to be strong, healthy, and vigorous, and working hard to achieve these goals, and then compulsion and addiction, a line that is unfortunately crossed by many people. To help differentiate one from the other, let's take a look at some bodies of authority on the matter. According to the National Institute of Health via Everyday Health, compulsive exercising is when exercise no longer feels like an activity you choose to do, but becomes an activity you feel you have to do. Similarly, NCBI considers compulsive exercise to be a craving for physical training, resulting in uncontrollable, excessive exercise behavior with harmful consequences, such as injuries and impaired social relations. At times, this behavior is accompanied by a need to burn off the calories, carbs, or anything else that may be perceived as an obstacle to the goal, ingested through food, compounding the matter even further. According to our sports dietitians, this addictive behavior indicates that you do not have a healthy relationship with food. Unless you're a professional athlete or aspire to be one, exercise should be used for many reasons, and these include for fun, to feel better physically and mentally, relieve tension and stress, improve mood, reinvigorate our bodies, boost energy, reduce the risk of various diseases, and so on. Once all these factors take a proverbial backseat to the addictive, compulsive behavior, an unhealthy relationship with food may be present. Do you obsess over healthy eating? WebMD defines orthorexia as an unhealthy focus on eating in a healthy way. Meanwhile, Dr. Bretman, who coined the term in 1996, calls it a fixation on righteous eating. Essentially, it's the rejection of many foods because they are considered not pure enough. So what's wrong with healthy eating anyway? Well, nothing per se, but the sustained unwanted thoughts about the fear of contamination of food cause a great deal of anxiety. This is a highly negative and draining emotion and can be quite crippling. At this point, food is about fear and control rather than nourishment and enjoyment. As such, it is a clear indication that the person in question may have an unhealthy relationship with food. Conclusion: healthy relationship with food or an unhealthy one? Next steps. The list of questions that we included here are by no means exhaustive. It is, however, a really good place to start. It can certainly help to answer the question, do I have a healthy relationship with food? Assessing your general approach to food and eating behavior is important because it can be revelatory, leading to a form of clarity. It also provides a starting point to allow you to take first steps to making the transition from an unhealthy relationship with food to a healthy one. That is to say, if in fact the guiding questions point in that direction to begin with. As always, we strongly encourage the help of a qualified health professional when you decide to make changes to your lifestyle. Developing a healthy relationship with food does not happen overnight. It takes time, practice, and mindfulness, and there will be ups and downs along the way. In the end, however, it's absolutely worth the journey.